Fuck Yes. Welcome to After the Hype. I'm your host, as always, Brian Dressel. With me, as always, Jonathan Hardesty.
Whoa.
Emily Blake.
Yep.
And Samantha Garrison.
Hey.
I went for a nice, mellow opening today.
Very NPR.
When I go way too fast, I fuck it all up.
But then it's funnier.
That's true.
I used to just constantly burst into hysterics at introduction and be unable to get anything out. And
as I've been editing them, I'm like, these aren't funny. They're just annoying.
Okay, well, they're funny to us.
Yes.
I guess? Okay.
The troll in me does appreciate that aggressive, like, you got to be in for this.
Yeah, so maybe we'll try it again next week.
Yeah, we'll
Let's
see.
do every other one. So every now and then people are like, oh, this is the show I'm listening to. Now,
It's hard to search for on iTunes.
Yeah.
How do you? Where's?
Granted, you would have already found us.
Yeah.
So it's whatever. Special guest this week, we have Mr. Eric Stolze back.
Hi, please just call me Sir Eric Stolze. Mr. Eric Stolze is my father's name. Also, that's not accurate, but thank you. Happy to be back. Very happy to be back.
I was going to say.
This is my first time being here since Chewie went full mom and is just like taking care of the wee one. I miss her here.
Yeah, well, she'll be on the next episode. She'll be on next week when you're not here.
Oh, well.
She planned that.
So I take it personally then.
Yeah.
Good.
She's the one who
Definitely take
reached
it
out to you. Was like, hey, Eric, do you want to be on again?
As long as I know where I stand.
Yeah. She reached out, and then she's like, if he's going to be there, I'm not.
Okay, good. I just want to know where I land on the spectrum of Chewie likes and dislikes.
She enjoys you on the episode, but not your company.
That's valid. Look, I buy that.
The distance that audio provides is perfect.
Yeah, totally.
Perfect.
The smell in the studio is appalling.
Yeah.
Speaking of, we're in a new studio.
Yeah, we are in a new studio. Wow. That's exactly where I was going to go. So there's some newness in the sound, maybe. It might be a little echoey as we're working out.
It might get more echoey.
It might get more echoey as we go on. I'm not going to explain that, but it might. And you might also hear a plane or two fly over because we are near an airport. And I was going to try to edit around them, and then I'm like, just put up a disclaimer. It'll be fine.
It's the new welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, it's every now and then.
When Comedy Bang Bang was first taking off, their studio was right next to an airport. It was like around here, and they would take plane breaks every time they heard a plane, where they would just like stop everything and play like Led Zeppelin or something.
I think I'll just let the plane roll. I think this is more fun.
Well,
yeah.
For mine, I realized that I have a finch, and I'm so used to his noise that I've never noticed him. And then I was listening at work, and I was like, "Oh, Tony's here," and I was like, "Oh shit, I've been recording with Tony in the background."
Does anyone else hear that bird?
I honestly don't think I've noticed yet. Now I'll have to keep an ear out for it.
Because I've been talking about like doing a podcast revolving around dogs, and I was just wondering what to do. You know, if my dog starts barking, and I thought, well, the podcast is about dogs. I should just let it roll. Just let him yell.
That works.
He's my co-host.
Yeah, totally works.
Give him his own microphone.
Lottie and the cats have their
Don't
own
go
room,
crazy.
but the bird was...
He doesn't need one.
Just a USB mic. That's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Let's do a quick where have you been doing? I will go first. I guess I watched.
Bummer.
Well, I was debating on like 4 or 5 different things that I wanted to say, but I'm gonna go with the new Halloween movie. I saw it, and it's. Sam disagrees with me, but I think it's really, really good. I think it has a really good sense of humor to it, and I think that the idea of doing generational horror is not something that I have seen really done before, and especially done this well. As a slasher, it's okay. Like, it hits the right points. It does what it's supposed to do, but it's really the humor and, like, the idea of, like, this is how it affects both the person who was attacked, their children, and their grandchildren, I think is a very interesting story to attempt to take on, and I think they did a really good job with it.
Samantha, why didn't you like it as much?
I only watched the first Halloween a week before I saw it,
and
I thought it was dope, but I thought that Laurie was really cool and smart, and then I went and saw this new one, and she was not as smart, and it made me really sad.
She's kind of a basket case in the new one.
Sure, but
she's right, but she's
being
also...
a basket case doesn't make you stupid. I think that... Sorry, one of the foam things just fell. That for me was like the frustrating part is like experiencing trauma or like mental illness induced by trauma doesn't make you stupid. It doesn't take away who you are. And it just really kind of bummed me out because I think there was a cooler movie to be made where Laurie was like smart and cunning and maybe becoming a little Michael Myers-y herself.
Yeah.
Which is kind of where they flirted with it, but they didn't go there. And I think that I just wanted more from it. I don't disagree with anything you said. The generational thing was cool and interesting, but this is also like I'm not familiar with the genre or anything. It was just
The force of your opinions is tearing the foam down.
I'm
off
sorry.
We need a sound effect counter every time one
Brian's just
drops
like,
down.
damn it,
Just a
Samantha's
slide
ruining
whistle.
my podcast.
There you go.
But to your point, not to spoil anything, I really dig the movie too. But I think you're talking about moments that I'm thinking of where even though she's been preparing for this moment her entire life, where Michael Myers comes out, she can't help but fall into the classic like, you've got to do a dumb thing for somebody to get you moments. And there's
Yeah.
a couple of parts where she, like, again, not to spoil anything, but there's a part where she like does the worst possible thing inside of her like impenetrable fortress of booby traps, and everybody in the theater was just kind of like, no, don't. And it's like, I mean, obviously
it's tough when you create a villain who's not that smart. He's just resilient.
Yeah,
It's
he's
his
a
main
Terminator of a
superpower. So
sort.
you can't outsmarting him's not that hard.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of do something dumb in order for him to get you.
for there to be a
Yeah,
threat.
but with how smart the movie is trying to be, it's kind of like a. I'm willing to give it to him. Like I'll give him the rope, but I understand the complaint. But yeah, I thought it was good, and I would recommend it if you like the genre. If you don't, this isn't going to be one that I think will like win you over to it, like a lot of people are saying. And it's, I think it's a pretty standard slasher that does things better than I thought it would.
Pretty satisfying.
Yeah, that's it for me though. John, what about you?
So I watched The Good Place on Netflix, all 2 seasons.
Perfect.
Yeah, and because you guys had talked about it on the podcast before, so I was kind of curious, and basically everything you said about it was my reaction to it as well.
Yeah, first season drags a little bit, but once you figure out where it's going, it's fantastic from there on out.
And I like the conceit of what they're doing by like not just sticking into the formula for too long.
Yeah.
Like they seem to be like, okay, we've played this out, move on, let's let's evolve this. And I was like, comedies don't really do that, so I really liked that they were doing that.
They've even to the point where they have abandoned their previous set. They had a
Yeah.
huge set on the Universal lot, and now it's like we're done, we're moving on.
And I thought that was amazing. I was like, wait, we're never going back here? Wow, that isn't done.
It bums me out though, because I really love driving through the set on the backlot tour.
Yogurt.
But no, I forget because I don't like just continue to listen to our past episodes over and over again. There was one moment that I burst out laughing at. It was the Derek stuff.
Oh,
Yeah.
Derek's great.
Jason
Derek.
Mantzoukas. You cannot beat Jason Mantzoukas in anything.
And when Mindy St. Clair
I'm
goes,
Derek.
I can
I'm
work
Derek."
with that.
Yeah. So like it basically tracks everything you said. The first season drags a little bit. The second season really comes to its own, but it just abruptly ends. I found myself being like, wait, that's it? After they brought the new conceit in.
Well, luckily there's season 3.
And season 3's going great.
Yeah,
It's
so far so
already
great.
just
Good.
delightful.
Just watched the most recent episode last night, and it just keeps you guessing.
Sam, what about you?
2 things,
Okay.
if I may. One of them is a little shameless because I saw The Grinch at the Cast and Crew screening last week and it was awesome and
Wow.
everyone should go see it and help me get my bonus. And I'm kidding, like see it, it's good. The other thing that like sincerely I want to talk about is that I finished The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix this week and it was pretty good. It filled the Vampire Diaries shaped hole in my heart. And it was also just like really well acted and really interesting and spooky. And if you're into that kind of melodrama, it's worth checking out.
Emily, what about you? Where have you been in?
I also watched a Netflix show. I watched the 2 seasons of The Norseman, which is I have mixed feelings about it. I really enjoyed the premise. It's about Vikings, but they're sort of they do Viking shit, but they talk like they're modern day people.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is really, really funny. Like there are hilarious interactions between people. Like rape is just this thing that happens. It's whatever. You know, people get raped. It's whatever. But and they actually do manage to make rape funny if that's possible. Yeah, because like there's a scene where a woman is their town has been pillaged and there's this like really power hungry woman who just wants to hook on to whatever man is most powerful. So the leader of the like tribe that comes in to attack them is like an earl or something, and she's like, "Ooh, I hope I get fucked by an earl." And he's like, "Well, I'm gonna rape you," and she's like, "Okay, put your seed in me." And so the whole time, and then he can't get it up, so she's just like, "God damn it! Now I'm not gonna have an earl baby." And it actually works, which is really weird, but. What at the same time, like I do have mixed feelings because like everyone
No.
I think the reason that it works is because everyone on the show is pretty terrible. Like they're all bad people. But then they also have moments where they're not bad people. It's just all very back and forth. My biggest problem probably with season 1, it got a little better in season 2. In season 1, there's a lot of homophobia. And that was rubbing me the wrong way the whole time. Because there's some moments that are just absolutely delightful. Like, these characters are so ridiculous. And they do such funny things and they say such funny things, but then you'll see someone like makes a joke about, like there's one character on the show who's very obviously gay, and he's and everyone, makes fun of him for it in season 1, and like it's a punchline in season 1 that he's gay. In season 2 they do a better job. He does give a speech about like it's more like just a thing that's not to be ashamed of in season 2, but in season 1 I was very uncomfortable with some of that. But it's God, there's some parts that are so funny. I can't believe I was laughing at a rape scene. I just was. I'm sorry, everyone. It just was really well done. And partly because of the tone of the show. Right. Because it's so toxic masculinity that they turn it into absurdity. Yeah. And you're like, you guys are so stupid. Like, they do stuff that's just so stupid. Because it's like, that's what men do, Anyway, it was really funny.
Eric, what about you?
I too watch Netflix. And
whoa,
not to brag or anything. I binged The Haunting of Hill House. I don't know if you already talked about that.
Love it.
Yeah, same. The thing that I love about horror, because I'm a big fan of the genre too. Like, I was there opening day for the new Halloween, and
you had a horror film on Netflix for a while, didn't you?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and it's on Shudder now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Not to get ahead of myself with the plugs or anything, but if you go to Shudder and look at late phases, but one of the great things about horror is that it's almost like how a frog will like absorb aspects of its environment to survive or adapt. Like, horror tends to be a really great funhouse mirror of the world around it when it's made, and acts as a really interesting time capsule in that way. And back in the early 2000s, we had what is now colloquially known as torture porn, because everybody was very much on edge. You had all that junk like Saw and Hostel and stuff like that was like really interested in taking you to the limits of what you're willing to watch. And now we are in a horror era that I call misery porn, because everyone's sad, everyone on this planet is super fucking bummed, and we have movies like Hereditary and The Witch and shows like The Haunting of Hill House where it's just like all these people are sad plus a ghost.
Well, and if I ever get time, I want to write something about it. But there's a great, it handles tragedy and haunting of tragedy in a very great way that really spoke to me.
I agree. And if you are looking for a really smart approach to the multi-generational, like, the trauma affecting a family, what Halloween can't really fully do because it's only, 90 minutes long. I mean, Haunting of Hill House is 10 hours of really interesting conversations about that.
It's definitely next on my to-watch list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told Chewie I'd wait for her, so we can only watch a little bit at a time.
I would recommend not binging it. Like, I did, and it was really intense. I had to move to something like The Good Place after as like a palate cleanse.
I'm
That's
concerned about the like gore level. I can't like.
It's not bad.
No.
It's not as interested in fact, Sabrina is so much gorier than Haunting of Hill House.
Sabrina's
You'd be surprised.
so nasty.
Totally.
We need to talk about 8th grade. We've been here for too long.
Yeah, totally.
So when we reached out to Eric to have him on for this, as we like to do with guests sometimes, it's like, hey, if you wanted to come on, what movie do you want to talk to? And this is what he said. So I had heard of this movie. I was planning on seeing it at some point, but now I get to see it now, and I enjoyed it, and we'll get to why and everything like that after we do a breakdown. So you're going to have 30 seconds to do this. Do you think you can do it?
Sure.
This one actually I think is pretty easy. Like,
yeah, it's
Hereditary,
not
that
plot-driven.
one was tough.
Yeah.
This one is, I think you could probably do it in 10 seconds if you had to. Just depends on phrasing. But let me pull up a timer here. You ready to go?
I'm good.
All right, you ready for this?
I was born ready for this.
8th grade in 30 seconds. Here we go, 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 go.
8th grade is the worst year of everyone's life, including Kayla's, but she's getting through it and she's becoming a better person on the other side.
Yeah, like I said, under 10 seconds.
Woo! That's a new record.
Yeah, that does it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, what's great about the movie is it's like, the old saying about like a simple story well told. Like, that's 8th grade to me. Like, it is extremely, it doesn't have to be any more complicated than it is. With the reality of this young woman's life is just presented very matter of fact, and there's no like wrinkle to it. There's no like, and also
There's a ghost.
And a ghost.
And also her house is haunted, and like, she doesn't have like a life-threatening illness. Like, there's no plus to it. There's no like elevator pitch like, oh yeah, as if 8th grade wasn't hard enough. It's like the point of the movie is no, like your life is hard enough, but you made it. You know?
There's really interesting points to it, but honestly, I think the best place to start with this is going to be, it's interesting when this happens, and I feel like it's happening less now than it used to back in the day, but when men feel the need to tell a women's story, or like a woman's story.
Yes.
It's something that I feel like most of the film world has kind of grown out of. Like they kind of like, it's not saying that like they can't, or women can't tell men's stories and men can't tell women's stories. I'm not saying that. It's just, it's interesting when someone's like, this is the calling I had to tell an 8th grade girl's story as a, I think, 29-year-old man.
I didn't look anything up about this movie before I watched it. So as soon as it was over, I just kind of assumed it was written by a woman. And so when I went to look it up, I was like, I can't believe a man made this movie. Yeah, it resonated with me on a major level.
It did for Chewie for the most. Chewie's not a big coming of age person. Neither is Sam. So it's kind of a who's going to be on which episode today?
I could relate a lot to I started crying at one point in this movie because I could relate so hard to it.
They really like it wears its emotions on its sleeve and not in a bad way. Yeah. Like it really just like it's going to be honest about things that suck, and like it has some of the most horrifying scenes I've seen in a movie this year, and it's just
it is the scariest horror film I've seen.
For me, the most horrifying thing about it is that the only time those annoying needle drops didn't happen is when men were talking. Yeah. And her one moment of triumph when she has that moment of bravery and sings the karaoke song, I wanted to revel in that moment because those are the only things I've chosen to remember about middle school. It was really unfortunate just because I feel like they had that stupid, it all just felt like a montage, and it felt like he was glossing over any attempts at truth to her life to get to that monologue for the dad and to get that nerdy boy's date. You know, and it was just that for me was the real frustrating point is it was just like, wow, okay, so you only turn off the fucking music. It was like worse than watching Baby Driver when the boys are talking. Thanks. Like that's how I knew it was the dude, and especially how I knew it was Bo Burnham because the music was that awful electronic shit that he does in his comedy acts.
I didn't notice it.
The thing is, the music didn't really play that big of a part for me. I agree with, like, we were talking a little bit before we started recording. I agree with John, where it was, I feel like it was a misstep because I don't think any of the music in the movie is something that somebody in 8th grade today would listen to.
It's music that, like, I would like and trying to kind of make me think of that time, but grossly misunderstanding what the point of the movie was, which is that she's in 8th grade. It's about her.
Yeah, and
she would never listen to chiptune. None of those kids, even how nerdy they would be.
I think the ducky, if you will, he might have listened to chiptune.
Ironically.
But the long and the short of it is kind of like to what Sam was saying, and with the music and all this stuff. I think that's where it proves that a man made this, because I think he hit the emotional beats right, and I think he hit the stories right. But I think when it's like, well, I want to get to that, the best speech in the movie's got to come from the dad, and like the characters that she's gonna like are gonna be this guy over here. Like he didn't really pay a lot of attention to the people around her unless they were the men around her. Everyone else kind of got fleeting glimpses. Like even her best friend-ish character from high school really doesn't have a lot. She just kind of shows up and is super nice, and that's it. But all like the dudes around her really have more than one thing. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing, and I'm not saying it's like necessarily a knock against the movie, but it is kind of, when a guy tells this sort of story, those are like the pitfalls that I think are really hard to avoid, and I don't think he necessarily avoided any of that.
It's also telling that, this is just, I think it was well intentioned, but he needed to really check his perspective. Kayla is an average size girl, especially for an 8th grader where you're kind of growing into your body and stuff. There were no other normal looking bodies in this film.
I think that was intelligent. I loved that.
But that's where it's like really infuriating because I don't want to pity someone who looks normal for looking normal in a swimsuit. That was really disturbing to me when she was kind of like the chubby girl at the party and seeing this normal body. If you showed this to someone actually in 8th grade, that could really fuck them up.
But it's not to make you pity her. It's to make you feel what she's feeling. She feels like she's the only chubby girl at that party.
When I think about what I weighed in high school, I was super skinny. And I never felt like I was skinny. I always felt like I was too fat all the time. And I think that's just so I get what you're saying. I think that's really, no matter what your size, you're always going to feel like everyone is prettier, thinner, better than you are.
I think that was the point of that party. They filled it with 14-year-old supermodels on purpose.
What he did then was like dehumanize the rest of the women at the expense of this narrative and then only give men lines. I found the whole thing like kind of really disturbing. Like the more I thought about it, the more it just made me like really upset. Because, like, 8th grade is such a fragile time. And even that scene in the car with the boy, he just, like, he just like really screwed the pooch on it, because it was clear he knew that boy's sexual impulses but didn't understand hers or her fear. And
I disagree. I think that
completely
scene was
disagree.
on point.
I absolutely love that scene.
My heart was
broken.
I've talked a lot. What did you say?
Oh, I mean, and as far as that was my favorite scene. Was that scene in the car and the scene with her dad giving the speech, actually. And yes, those are two scenes that have very heavy men talking.
Sure,
but,
and they're great scenes. Like, I'm not saying they're bad scenes. It's just,
Well, the reason that I mean, my heart broke because of the amount of times that happens. The shit in the car, the way that she was apologizing for not wanting to have sex with him. And the way he was telling her, well, some other guy is going to come along and do it, and he's going to be an asshole, not like me. Oh, my God, I've heard that, and I've fallen for it. I've had boys, like, convince me to do things I didn't want to do because they made me feel so, like, it was my problem that I didn't want to sleep with them.
And they're doing you a favor.
Yeah, and they're doing you a favor and all of that. And it just resonated real hard, and I just thought, and then later on when she gets a speech with her dad, we mentioned it before, I don't have a really healthy relationship with my dad or my stepdad. I have two really shitty father figures. I've never had that. I've never had a father figure treat me with the amount of respect that he treated her in that moment and say those things to her. So I was just like a mess because I was like, I want my dad to be like that. But what I wrote down in my notes was she was happy until that dude came at her in the car. And her dad made her feel wanted again. A man broke it. And a man fixed it. And I feel like that's a lesson that men need to learn, because this was a movie full of like guys were kind of being assholes, and then her dad came along and showed what a man looks like. And so I think that's yes, this movie is about a girl, but there's also a lot of lessons from men within this about how to behave.
I would argue that is one of the best dad speeches in a movie.
It's pretty brilliant.
And he does such a good job with it. It's so good.
Well, and then to Sam's point too, you lose that specificity on her, which coming at it,
I didn't lose that.
And they chose the sex route to get to that speech. Like,
again, that doesn't bother because that all
real.
rings.
I'm aware that it's real. I'm a fucking female. Like, I'm aware that is real and that is our lived experience. I experienced that a lot because I also fucking grew up in church where everyone talks about sex all the time and then makes you feel horrible for the body that you're in. I understand that. I also understand what it's like to have a good dad. I'm very, very fortunate. But what bummed me is that I am also more than that. Men have broken me. Women have broken me. 8th grade broke me in a lot of ways. And it's not just my sexuality and my body. And that's what it felt like this movie relegated this little girl to. Because at first it was like, oh, the socialization and stuff. And then they played the music over the karaoke scene. There was no specificity to that party. All the other girls were bitches instead of like the same as her, but feel, like in 8th grade, you're all in your little glass bubbles and stuff. And I don't know. It really made me angry. I'm so tired of us just being reduced to like fucking sex objects so that a dad can have a good speech.
But the movie also promises that specificity too, with the way they're using the music that we recognize. To like it's kind of whether it means to or not, it seems to be saying we're going to look at those bubbles and explore those because this is music they don't listen to. These are things that are kind of outside of that time period, those kids' age range.
Yeah.
We're getting more. We're getting like
I really liked the Enya. Like, the Enya scene was very good. That specificity of, like, zoning out on your phone.
Yeah.
And that feeling, like, that, I wanted more of that. And instead it just got reduced to a sex story with a dad fixing her.
You didn't like the YouTube videos that she did? You didn't think that? Because I felt like what I got out of those was there was so much... She was so optimistic, and that was what was so great about her as a character, is that she was just like, everything's going to be great. Even though no one watched her video, she kept going on and lying, basically being like, this is how you're confident. It's like, you don't know how to be you're giving advice to people, you're also lost. And that's also very relatable. You're like, I wrote books when I was in elementary school on how to get boys, and I tried to sell them to people. One girl actually bought one, and then the teacher told me I couldn't do that.
Do you still have them?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Where can I get these? Are they online?
But that's the kind of specificity where it's like, I think the YouTube videos felt a little like a contrivance because they happened in the vacuum. What yours did was like, there's that optimism and you had just enough swagger to get someone else on your train. And like, that's a real and funny and like charming story. And it doesn't paint you necessarily just as like a sad caricature. It's like, oh, that's Emily.
That's
like,
your
I,
point.
like
Maybe
that's
she had
Emily and
somebody
she's
who
dope.
interacted with her other than that boy late in the movie.
Yeah, because that's. I just felt like she was so lonely, and everybody is lonely in middle school. But like, I wanted to know why, or like what is the environment that a girl that's this sort of average would be this lonely? Because there's nothing bad about her.
Well, she suffers from really severe social anxiety. You know, it's something that tends to make her feel so withdrawn and isolated from others that she isn't really.
But even
set
if
to
she had
succeed.
like, she was obsessed with online and stuff. What if she had online relationships? Because I feel like that's also true of a lot of younger kids. Like the kids that I used to volunteer with at the animal shelter and stuff that are in high school. A lot of them have friends. Like they're little weirdos. They volunteer with animals. They have friends online. They don't have friends at school. They hang out with dogs and then they talk to their online buddies, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I guess that's the thing. It just kind of lacked any sort of specificity for me. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'll stop talking. I just feel like
you also have a perspective.
Yeah.
We don't
yeah,
have to
I
agree.
just found it, yeah.
But I'm also trying to extrapolate that too, because the YouTube thing made sense for the movie, but I'm also like not from like my 8th grade was a generational difference in terms of the things we used. We didn't come to online until like 9th, 10th grade. Like there's a lot of like it's a weird shift.
Yeah.
And one that didn't I felt had no grounding. Maybe
I think it
necessarily.
totally has ground. Like I have who are just a hair older than the people in this.
Okay.
And they both have YouTube channels. They both do this. Nobody watches them except for me. And like maybe a few of their friends. It's like, yeah, I have this video on how to do special effects, and 10 people have watched it. And it's like,
okay,
and like it's just like it is a thing because people, they see grown-ups do it. They see the celebrities they like. They have these YouTube channels and Instagram things, and they want to be like them. And it just happens, and nobody fucking watches them, and they basically make it for themselves. Kind of like how this podcast was for a couple of years. It's just like, it's one of those things where like you do it until you get an audience, or then you quit. And these kids think that they're going to be internet famous for doing it. And the way to do that is to put on your best smile and just do your best. And she's just lying through her teeth. Like, this is how I became confident. And this is how I did this. And it's one of those things where like you can see her, like the wheels turning. The more I tell myself this is how I do it, I will be able to do it. Because you have the whole speech of like, this is how you become confident, overlaid with her at the party of her not being confident. And it's like,
But then she was.
She becomes
but then
confident,
but then so it works. Like she just keeps telling herself to do these things, and then she could do it. And it's like she's almost like repeating a mantra to herself, but it's a YouTube channel.
When I've worked on a couple of things with influencers, which is a hell of a thing. But I worked on this one project, and there was a kid who was this big Instagram model kid. I have things to say, but I will not call him out. Anyway.
I'm sitting right here. This is so embarrassing.
He was
You said we would talk about this after the recording. I can't believe you just called me out like this.
How embarrassing.
But
for
we
you.
were talking, and I think it was like I think he was still in high school. I think he was like a senior or something. I don't know. I don't know age anymore. And we were talking about that, about the whole Instagram follower thing, and he was saying that yes, right now in high school, your popularity is based on your following online. If you have a lot of followers, then you're popular. If you don't, then you're seen as like lower tier. And he was saying that's actually how it is, at least at his school. And I was just like, I was horrified at the idea. Like, it's not hard enough in high school when you're just like dealing with real life friends to try to have to deal with getting people, finding some kind of way to get people to follow you online. In addition to that sounds horrific. Like I was just like, oh, thank God, I want to be in high school right now. That sounds terrible. But yeah,
it's kind of weird. As a kid, I always wondered where I would cross the line, and to the like, I don't get these kids anymore. And I never realized it would be at this point with that type of thing.
Yeah.
As I'm watching this movie, I'm just like, that's why I had that. Like, it just doesn't feel like this doesn't make any sense because I don't have any touchstone for like Brian, like you said, for those kids who have that thing going on. And that
online used to be a retreat from meat space, not a way to make it work.
Yeah. No, it's such a different thing than how.
But you can see that's why she has the YouTube channel. That's how she's going to do it. She's going to get all these followers, and it just doesn't work.
And it's one of those things where as you're watching the videos, you're almost praying that nobody's watching them. Because like you've seen her in school, you've seen her trying to interact with the popular kids, you've seen her interact with not the popular kids, and you're like, if any of these kids watch these videos, like they are just going to rip into you.
Yeah. Well, I quite love the screenplay in part because I really respond to the structure of, almost breaking the film into chapters with each one being started by a different YouTube video. and that YouTube video kind of establishing a theme for the scenes that
For the
are
next
follow.
like 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, because it's covering almost an entire year of this young woman's life, and it's a little episodic in that respect, but it's really interested in having a very specific focus for each of these moments in her life, and the final video is not to any potential YouTube subscribers; it's to her.
Yeah.
And that was a moment that I actually found myself weeping at. I cried 2 times watching this movie. I should also say I saw this movie 3 times in theaters because I really, really responded to it. But it's part of why I'm interested in talking to you about it more because, your experience watching it is one of watching it as a woman, and I watched it as a man.
I also watched it as a woman.
You did? Sure? Well, but everyone I've talked to, I mean, it's 99% on Rotten Tomatoes, whatever that means, and it's like very universally. No, not at all. But it's got this universal praise. So I'm interested in hearing the point of view of somebody who's like calling it out on what they perceive to be BS. Because to me, I was really connecting to it as like someone who was bullied as a kid and still has a lot of social anxiety issues, and I also do have a complicated relationships with my family and things like that. So. I wept during the dad speech because I was like, oh my God, if only, right? And then I wept during the last...
It's such interesting that we had the same response. Like, I wish my dad was this nice.
Well, I don't know. Have you all seen Call Me By Your Name?
Yes.
So there's similarly a monologue from a father that is pure... It's almost like a fantasy film.
Yeah,
It's
wish fulfillment.
It's
of
wish
dads.
fulfillment, yeah. And but there's something to that I really love and respond to
Yeah.
because... The cliche, the like save the cat, crack it open to page 75 or whatever, and it's like the dad is a source of conflict, like the parents are always going to be in the way. And especially Call Me By Your Name, which is a gay romance film. You're basically sitting there waiting for conflict. You're waiting for this dad to be like, now listen, boy. And instead the dad literally sits down and smokes a cigarette and talks for 10 minutes, and there's not a dry seat in the house. And he's saying things like, I want you to have the life that I was not brave enough to get. There's even these implications from the father that he wished that he had explored his, sexuality more when he was his son's age. And it's, again, that speech might not have ever happened in human history, but to see it in the context of drama is devastating. It's so moving and it feels right.
That's the only thing in that movie I actually enjoyed. Like, that speech was
Sure.
so good. The movie itself, I think, that's why it's not on this podcast.
Sure.
It's just too much to just... Ugh.
But that speech
was so good.
And, Michael Stolberg is
Yeah.
like a Mensa-level genius at acting.
Yeah.
And, that guy literally is like, he walks into Men in Black 3 and makes it interesting. Everything he touches is gold as far as I'm concerned. But to that point, similarly, the father, who is like a suburban goofball, gets this moment of great grace and transcendence, and it is absolutely something straight out of fantasy, but it's also a level of exaggeration that you see from her point of view in the rest of the film as well. Like, everything is the end of the world to this woman because everything is life or death stakes. Everything is of severe, deep, anxious response. And in that moment, he becomes almost like a fantasy hero because that's what she needs and that's what she's looking for on some level. But I also really responded to the speech that she has at the end because I really love the fact that it's to Kayla and not like,
great.
hey, subscribers. And it's like, the things that she's saying to her future self, I got really inspired by because I realized that as a 32 going on 33-year-old man, I need those words of wisdom that she's giving herself as a 13-year-old girl just as much as she needs it in that moment.
That scene was really good, especially how it was juxtaposed with the YouTube videos and that framing.
Oh, 100%.
And as someone who does have his own social anxiety and who uses stuff like podcast and internet, and things like that just to get through it.
Yeah.
It was just like, it hit me. It was poignant. And it's like, she wasn't looking at anybody. She was looking at the floor or some corner.
Oh, when she's talking to the bitch girl?
Yeah. And I know that.
loved that.
We
that's
she
great.
wasn't looking at it.
Yeah, just like this is all
She's
I
like,
have right
As
now.
soon as I look
that's
up, I'm
great.
going to lose my nerve. So she just keeps staring at the floor.
Yeah.
we find a place that's like near person to
Sure.
look at, that we're not looking in the eyes because it can be kind of difficult to do.
Yeah.
And I do it a lot, but like I work on it and try to get past it because it just becomes too much.
And it's
we
almost-
look down
yeah.
and over to the left a little bit or to the right a little bit when we're talking to make a point.
To get through the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, that chew out scene, it's so good too because you know it's 100% for her to say that I did it because the girl who was just chewed out was gonna go, That was weird.
Yeah,
a-
she's
Yeah.
like
And
couldn't
that's
care
it.
less.
What a weirdo.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
for her, and again, it's
Yeah.
like similar to the video that she makes for herself at
Yeah.
the end as a time capsule. It's a gift from herself to herself.
Yeah.
And I really responded to that. And, you know, granted, it's certainly not like drop the mic, a dramatic monologue that like actors are going to be like doing in acting classes, like the dad speech. But it's her version of her ability to do that as someone who's, you know, like finding her voice and her courage and things like that. So.
I found that so relatable because like the last time I ever saw my dad, I told him he was a piece of shit, and I've never spoken to him since. And I don't even know if he remembers that or cares. Doesn't matter to me.
But it was
'Cause
for
it's
you.
the last
That was-
thing
yeah.
he will go to his grave, and the last interaction I had with him was telling him how much he was a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And I am totally cool with that.
And that was a gift to yourself
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you needed it
It's
more than he
something
needed
you
it.
need.
Yeah.
That's what was great about that, is that was for her. The fact that she walked away smiling, it did not matter what was going on behind her. It mattered
No.
that she had the courage to do that.
And
Yeah.
like the credit to both, I'm forgetting her name now, and I can't get my
Elsie
phone.
Fisher.
Thank you. Credit to both her and then the girl who played the quote unquote popular girl. Like I think they both did such a good job with it. Of just like that girl nailed the deadpan. Like you are an aunt to me, and I don't know why you're still talking at me.
when they're
Like
on
didn't
the-
even put her phone down. Like, like
When they're in the middle of the hall and she's trying to like give them the thank you letter and be nice,
Yeah.
and they're just like, "What?"
She's like, I like your shirt. I like shirts too. And she's like, what? Okay. Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, the dumb thing that you can never take back.
Yep. Oh,
Yeah.
I've
That's
said-
just Tuesday for me.
I've said many of them.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
One of the first times I hit on a girl, I told her that I was drinking too much and I had to go pee, and then I ran away.
Oh.
Yeah, that didn't go very well.
The thing is, like, you remember these moments as these mortifying experiences. That, like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
ever just wake up in the middle of the night and you remember something embarrassing
Sure.
you did, and you're like,
God.
why is that still in my head?
Yeah.
Stop. But, like, you realize that the people who were in that moment with you, they don't fucking remember it most of the
Sure.
time. I'm sure
Yeah.
sometimes they do, but a lot of times it's things that drive you crazy. You're the only one who remembers it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, God, I'm so mortified. But it's like, it's fine. Nobody is thinking of you that
And
way.
It's
or
our
very
it's our
rarely.
ghosts that show up
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
haunted house.
Yeah.
Like these anxieties that are like, do you remember when you did this? And it's like, oh god, a ghost.
And I think that this whole movie is like printed in that ink of like those borderline traumatic, like those moments that you remember so clearly that are just minutia.
Yeah.
That nevertheless you recall as bright as beacons in your mind's eye. And the entire film has that really good balance between it feels like hell, where everything is deeply exaggerated to this agonizing degree, or it feels like purgatory. Like he makes you sit and you listen to that whole goddamn band portrayal, the performance of Star Spangled Banner.
Oh,
Like you listen to the entire thing, because that's what middle school is you
Yeah.
gotta listen to that whole fucking thing all the way through.
So
It
awful.
forces you to listen to it from beginning to end. And I responded to that because I was like, yeah, that reminds me of what it feels like to just be like sitting and waiting for the day to be over
I
in
was
middle
in
school.
band. I remember that.
for us,
Samesies,
for us it was choir. I wasn't
Yeah.
even good enough for band.
Oh well,
Jesus.
not
was
to
also-
brag, but I did play the tambourine in 8th grade, and I'd like to think that I like to think that I blazed a trail for future tambourine players at
I'm
West
so
Middle
happy
School.
they opened with not to brag.
Yeah, because I wasn't, because it's horrifying. But to that point, on that note, I do think I'm in the vast minority at this table because this remains my favorite score and soundtrack of the entire year so far. This movie has my favorite musical moments in movies that I've seen this year so far.
It's interesting. I didn't. The thing for me with the score was that I just kind of nothinged it. Like
Hmm.
I definitely noticed like when it was coming in and out.
Sure.
And I agree with John where I felt like it was stilted more to people in their 30s than it was to people in their 8th grade.
Which is true. I mean, nobody's listening to Enya in
Yeah.
8th grade
But was
today.
this movie for people in 8th grade, or I think it was
No.
for people?
I think it was
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
people in their 30s, but that's where
Yeah.
that's where I think it's interesting because like say the same thing with say Lady Bird or Perks of Being a Wallflower, also made for people in their 30s, not in those grades, and then they set them in that time period.
Sure.
There's also
Whereas
a
this
movie-
one kept it modern, but then made it for us, and I think that's an interesting idea. But more to the music.
Well, just that I related to this so much as somebody who suffers from anxiety and as somebody who, grapples with like getting over my own mental interpretation of a moment instead of the reality of the moment. And in that way, my favorite musical moment of anything this year, even more so than Eminem's single for Venom, believe it or not, was the controversial... I'm being serious right now, I swear. But the controversial pool party sequence, like when she comes out and that music, I sat there and I had chills almost to like an ASMR degree because that electronic music The composer, her name's Anna Meredith. That track is called Nautilus, which I think like speaks to this like weird epic scale that this strange music is trying to convey in this moment, is that it's just so large. And, you know, granted, if you're used to electronic music, then, you know, it does almost start to sound a little bit like just background ambience.
Sure.
But to me, I was sitting there and it made this movie such a theatrical experience where I was like, oh my God, this is what goes through my head when I go to a party and I know like one other person and I barely know that person and I'm surrounded by people laughing and having in-jokes and everything in my head is just like dun 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 dun, and I was like, I get it, like this is me.
That's me at every rap party Chewy takes me to.
110%. Yeah.
I know Chewy. I don't know anyone else.
Yeah.
You're all looking at me like, what'd you do on this film?
That's
I did nothing.
It's interesting that it hit the music for you, because I like wrote that scene down as like one of my favorite like moments, but not for the music. Although I mean they work in conjunction, but for the cinematography, I forgot to look up who the DP was, but just when they're zooming out on her, they made such a really, really clever decision in that scene. They're zooming out on her, and she's in the window looking out on the party, and you're looking at her, looking at her, and then a beach ball flies past the screen, and as soon as the beach ball flies past the screen, you're looking at the party. It was such a beautifully timed shot, and it's just like, because you don't know when to take your eye away, and they helped you. They were like, ball goes by, oh, I'm in the party now. It was just so very clever, and there were a lot of little choices like that throughout the movie that blink and you'll miss it. Like when the mom of the popular girl, when she opens the door and she's like, "Where's your dad?" and she's like looking around, and you're like, "Oh, that's why she invited Kayla to the party."
Where's your dad with all the dreamy speeches?
Yeah.
I want a dreamy speech.
But there were just so many like really great little choices throughout this movie that I enjoyed, and I really liked the cinematography. I think I wrote a few more down, but that was my favorite.
You just reminded me of the moment where. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
For me, the pool party scene, the reason it bothered me so much is my anxiety manifests as OCD. So instead of ASMR, I get severe misophonia.
Oh, sure.
Especially electronic sounds.
Oh, God.
Misophonia is when you something irritates you so much that it triggers a fight or flight response.
Oh.
I will scream at people for whistling because I get so ragey, and certain electronic music does that
Sure.
to me.
What about like mouth sounds, like chewing and things like that?
Not so much that. It's different, but for me, what also was really funny is whenever I go to a party or something, I try to find something to do. If it's a casino night, like my fiance's not rat parties, but like holiday parties often are, I'm a pro because I'm really good at blackjack. If there's karaoke, that is how I would have taken my power. And damn it, if I didn't want to know this little girl's karaoke tune and see that moment of triumph, because I was just like, why are you doing this to me? I want to see this scene. Your music's in the way of my scene.
Totally.
And I was just like, having
Do you think they had a song but they couldn't get clearance, and then they were like, "Uh-oh"?
That's
it,
kind
yeah.
of what
It's either
it
that
seemed
or
like.
I figured it was either that or the actress went, I can't sing.
Oh yeah, that's a possibility.
I think she kind of can, though, because it's Agnes from DM1 and 2.
She's a very good voice
Yeah,
actor.
she can sing a little bit. Yeah.
but
I don't
but it
think
could
she
just be,
needed to be good.
I mean,
she just needed to have
but-
gusto.
I guess.
But
I mean,
if she had
would
gone
you-
to the director and said, I'm not comfortable with it, he
Then
might have gone,
yeah.
okay, then
Well,
I'll fix
that's
it.
what I'm asking is, do we think it was a creative choice to do it that way, or do we think it was a necessity that they did it that way?
I think, as I recall from an interview, and I can't remember the song, but there was a clearance issue because
okay.
they were working with a very limited budget.
Yeah.
And they'd blown it all on pure
moods ahead of
moods.
time.
Yeah.
I
So
was
just-
bummed, too, because it was the way that it was shot and with the score over it. I was like, shit, this is going to be like her fantasy sequence of having confidence. I was really relieved when it was real, but I hated that I felt that way.
I felt the
Those
same way.
moments
I
of
thought it was-
triumph are so rare, and I just wanted one for her that was honest, like that.
But she got that at the end. She didn't get it in karaoke that she maybe should have.
Sure,
Yeah,
but
I
it,
do
it
kind
gave
of-
her the confidence to write that letter and have
Yeah.
that conversation.
I do kind of wish that someone had been like, "Hey, good job on the," like just that there had been some follow. It's because in that moment everyone seemed so enamored with her singing, and then there was never anything else to it.
But I think
Didn't
the
change
enamored with her
anything.
singing was more like, oh, she's still here.
Oh, I thought it was like everyone was like, "Oh, she can."
There was kind of a dumbfounded,
I-
huh?
I got more of
Look,
the,
that face.
oh, she's singing? I thought she
Interesting.
left. She hasn't
I thought
been here for
everybody
like half
was
an hour.
impressed with her singing.
I think this scene is proving to be a fascinating Rorschach test.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Everyone's projecting a lot of fascinating things
Optimist.
into
That's
it.
why I
Yeah.
related to her so hard. I was like, I too would be like, I'm
Yeah.
doing great.
I just assumed she was awesome.
Yeah. But no, yeah, that music in that scene and throughout, just like all the weird loops and electronic loops, I responded to because it was an interesting mix of like melody and like agony. It really was like
Yeah.
there is something very frustrating, and especially like I've been listening to that Nautilus track from the soundtrack, and it's like 7 minutes long.
Oh, wow.
And it's just 7 minutes of that just like dun dun dun, just so driving, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is a lot for a scene about a young girl going to a pool party.
That's how it. I mean, to their
yeah.
credit, that is how it feels.
And totally. And I thought that Bo Burnham had done the music, I assumed, because like you said earlier, like he's known in his, if people don't know, the writer-director of this, Bo Burnham, is kind of a prodigal, like YouTube comedian sensation. Like he made his first YouTube videos when he was 13, mostly around him making like funny songs, not like Weird Al parodies, but more like Adam Sandler, like, oh, there's a joke to this song, and I'm going to push that throughout this original tune that I'm going to play on the piano. But he does a lot of like electronic and synthesized music for his shows, his stage shows. So it's in that vein, but it's also from this composer Anna Meredith, who I forget what else she's done, mostly indie stuff. But it's totally in line with his vibe in comedy, but he's doing something completely different with it here.
One more thing before we move into the end of this, because I still think there's
so much we haven't talked about.
I know, there's so much. But the one thing that I want to bring up, and I want to see the read on the table for it, what do you guys think about the choice of not having the mother in it?
It's interesting. Unusual, you know, because normally in movies like this, you either get the nuclear family that's just kind of benign, like in a John Hughes film, where like the parents are together, but they're dopes.
Yeah.
Or you get, the dysfunctional family where it's like, oh, this person has to overcome the like broken home. Or you get a single mother, which is so much more, like the classic, like we're in this together, kind of vibe.
It's either the classic that or the classic like teenage girl hates their mom sort of thing.
I think it accentuates her loneliness because there are things that you would go tell your mom about that you're not going to tell your dad about.
Yeah.
And so she had
like the
fewer
banana,
people.
for example.
Like the banana scene.
Oh man.
Or even just the
Oh,
basic
so good.
makeup tutorial and skincare, and the fact that she never pulled her hair back or anything. Like, not that you have to, but I just thought it was interesting, like things that your mom might help you with
Would
or
tell you,
teach
yeah.
you to do,
Yeah.
especially as
That's
a middle
interesting.
schooler.
Yeah.
Her mom would have bought her a better bathing suit.
Yeah, like it was just
Yeah.
her dad was doing the best he could, and I liked that they didn't have her mom there because it added a little bit of like honesty or like credibility to the story.
It reminded me of the movie Away We Go, if you guys remember that one from forever ago.
John Krasinski.
Yeah, John Krasinski meets up with his brother at some point in the movie, and his brother's wife has just left, and he's just going through this like horrible downward spiral of like, I can't be a single dad to a girl. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I won't know if she has the right backpack. I don't know anything about makeup. When she goes through puberty, I won't know what to do. And this is like the actualization of that guy's fears in that movie, but he has to actually live it in this movie.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting because like I kept expecting the turn to be, oh, when your mom died, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, your mom just left.
Yeah.
And when she was so young.
Yeah. It's just, it's like, it's brutal.
And it's only mentioned in that one moment. It's not it's not something they because in a lot of places that would have been worked into the plot way sooner so that we all knew, and then it would have been brought up over and over again as a point of conflict, and it's also like they've both just moved on from it.
Yeah, it's not like you would have expected in a lesser film at some point, like, well, if mom was here, well, I'm not your mom, and that just, it never.
There's
I
a
like
worse.
that the only conflict from it is that her single dad's kind of cute
Yeah.
and like way cooler than
And it's
she
just
is.
annoying like all
Yeah.
parents are annoying.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Like,
many
please
dad
stop
jokes.
loving me, fucking
So
weirdo.
many dad jokes, like, look, it's a worm. It's just like, oh, I can't wait to be that dad someday.
When he stops at dinner to like explain to her how much he loves her, and she's like, "What? Stop! What are you doing? I'm never gonna talk. I'm never
Yeah.
gonna eat with you again." Like,
Yeah. she's like, you said you just had one more thing to say, and he's trying to say all
it's
these
a couple
nice
more.
things.
It's the
My dad-
same idea.
My dad does do shit like that when he visits. He'll just walk up. He's not a very talkative guy, but he'll just like walk up and hug me randomly, and he'll just be like, "Oh, Jimmer," and I'm like, "Okay, Dad."
Cool, thanks.
I'm 100% going to be that dad. I feel bad for my son. He's going to
It's
get used
nice
to it.
though.
Yeah.
Once you get out of the teen
Beats the
years, it's
alternative.
really great.
Yeah.
I had a for right when I was going through like the most turmoil with my family. A friend of mine was talking about how annoyed he was because his mom kept telling her he loved her all the time, and it was so annoying. And he just looks at me and he goes, "And it's so." Oh, I'm sorry. And I was like, I'm glad your mom loves you.
I know
Like,
I know
please
there's
all of you
a
be cheesy dads. It is great.
planning on it. Fingers crossed. I know there's a limit on the time available, but should we broach the topic of the car scene?
Yeah, that would probably be a good idea. I don't really know, because here's the thing. Like in high school, I was afraid to basically talk to a girl that I wasn't friends with. Like if I was a friend with a girl, I I had no problem with it. But if there's any sort of romantic anything, I couldn't. I'd break down. I just could not.
I erred on the side of just not even approaching it.
Yeah.
Because I was close friends with enough girls in middle school and high school that like I would hear their perspective on things like that, and I was like, well, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to attempt, because if the consequences are that bad, then I'll figure it out in my own way. But
Yeah.
But so I never experienced moments like that.
No, and I mean, hopefully I never would have ever.
Exactly.
But it's something like the car scene in this movie. I think it's very good filmmaking, and like Chewie and I are watching, like this is the most uncomfortable I've ever been watching a movie this year. Like it's just, and I think it's because it's the longest scene in the movie. Like it just, I didn't sit there with a stopwatch or anything, but
Yeah.
I would bet dollars to donuts this is the longest scene in the movie, and it just keeps going, and you know where it's going the second she gets out of the car.
Yeah.
The second the girl's friend gets out of the car, it's like, this is fucked, and you know it right away. And like there was hints to it in the scene in the food court that this guy is probably not the best guy to be sitting next to, but
Yeah.
that scene's rough. But
And I went to a Q&A with Bo Burnham and Elsie Fisher, one of the 3 times that I saw this in the theater. and that was something that a lot of people in the audience had questions about, was that scene, because it is almost like it's like the nucleus of this movie and the nucleus of Kayla's experience in this film. And people were like so curious about all the thought that went into it, and how like it stops at a certain point, but it still has all of this agony and shame associated with it.
Yeah.
And it was Elsie, the actress, who was talking about it the most, who was saying that like it's still trauma and it's still assault, and like there doesn't have to be like a body in the river for this to be like the worst thing to happen to this person at this point in her life, you know. And it's interesting to see something like that in a movie, because so often movies will just take the worst extreme of something and will say like, okay, well now for the most amount of drama, obviously this has to go as far or as terrible as it could. And that doesn't happen in this case, but you experience the experience from her point of view all the same as something that is so scary, and the shame, especially afterwards. Like the if there's anything that, you know, it's wrong to say that like for it to stop at a certain point in the backseat of the car is merciful, but like if you feel like you escaped something, you have to sit with the shame and the bad man putting you through this experience of like, I was just trying to do something for you, like what you were saying earlier, like this was for you, and you screwed it up, and like you're put through this emotional horror show.
Oh yeah.
And there's just no escape from it. Like you sit with that in this film, and you know it's all the more exciting and pleasing and crowd pleasing at the end when she's able to think about herself instead of apologizing to the man who tried to have his way with her in the back seat, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that is really the scene that cemented this as my favorite of the year, just because it's doing very important and significant things, but in a way that's maybe even harder, because it's not just like trying to be this awful sensational thing.
And I think by showing that slight restraint, it made it that much better, because I can't think of a movie where no actually means no.
Sure.
Because usually in movies, no is not a thing. And
Sure.
she eventually shouts no, and
Yeah.
it stops.
And this is something
The assault stops. He
Yes.
still berates her the whole way home. He's a horrible fuck.
Yeah, totally. And this is something that happens all the time too, you know, and I think that there were probably a lot of men watching this movie that might see more of themselves in that guy driving the car than they would agree, because a lot of men in the Me Too movement are saying like, well, I've never like assaulted a woman, I've never raped anyone, but like they've done something like that.
Yeah.
The
9
coercion.
times out of 10.
I like
yeah.
the way that Lady Bird did it, because
Yeah.
I was on that episode and I thought this was similar. That moment where like Lady Bird and Timothy's their encounter was consensual, but it was coercive in that he wasn't honest with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I liked about that is that she was kind of self-possessed enough to yell at him and say, "Who's on top there first time?"
Yeah, totally.
Which is a great line.
Yeah.
But I did like that they didn't go all the way with it. But it just made me sad, because there is always that moment, and I feel like it always happens like around 8th grade. Maybe it's different, but where you realize you're not a person anymore, you're a girl, and that's kind of subhuman.
I think it was very smart to do it the way they did because this is what happens. She said no honestly to this guy, and he made her feel like shit the whole way home, and told her that now this is going to hurt her, not me. You're the one who's hurt by this. I was just trying to help you. So what happens next time she's in that situation? Well, she doesn't want to be a bitch. She doesn't want to look bad. She doesn't want to have to apologize again. So she does it, and then the next step is to call her a slut. And that's how the system works. That's how we do it. That's how we reduce women to that point.
He created a self-fulfilling prophecy for her.
Yeah. And that was what was so upsetting to watch. I didn't experience this in grade school, but definitely knew guys like this in high school. I had a boyfriend who coerced me into sex. He did what a lot of guys do, which is that bullshit about blue balls. Oh, you turned me on. You got me turned on. You got me hot and bothered by making out with me. So now you have to have sex with me. Otherwise, I'm going to end up in pain because I'll get blue balls. You don't want to have blue balls, do you? That was like so.
That's what your hands for.
Yeah,
I mean, but you don't know to say that as a
and
younger
guys say that all the
Yeah,
time.
it's
So
like-
now, as an adult, when any dude's like, "Oh, now I got blue balls," I'm like, "Don't fucking come at me with that shit. I don't care. You deal with that on
I
your
bet
own."
you know how to masturbate.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here.
Guys do that shit.
As
I'm
the-
sorry.
sock.
As the weird,
You didn't
Don't
get
give
what
up a
you
sock.
as
You
the
didn't get what you wanted. Tough shit.
Yeah.
yeah, you have your evening to yourself. That's fine. Like as a weird lonely nerd, I was like, where's the go be by yourself? That's fine.
Yeah, totally.
So here's the
There's
question.
a happy
though.
ending for you.
Right.
Give your own happy ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we move
Love
into
yourself
quotes,
before you
Yeah.
love others.
Before we move into quotes, I have one more follow-up question to that scene. So we both, or not we both, we all kind of agree this is a self-fulfilling prophecy that this guy is creating to this girl. Do you think that what she learned throughout the movie would help her combat that moving forward? Or do you think that no matter the fact that she got a little bit of confidence at the end, stood up to her bully, do you think that was enough to keep her moving forward? Or do you think this girl's going to keep having problems throughout high school? Like, will she keep finding these douchebag guys, these friends who aren't friends?
Well, there's a lot of bad men out there. But,
Of course.
But she promises herself to, like, if you ever get a boyfriend, get one who knows how to treat you.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's, like, verbalizing that to herself in this time capsule. I mean, certainly, like, you know, we all lose our way and we forget, like, our own standards sometimes. But I think the fact that she can focus on that as a concept at such a crucial moment and such a crucial age, I think bodes really well for her.
I think having her dad be a model for what a man's supposed to look like is very helpful.
Yeah.
You know, and him giving that speech to her and helping her have the confidence to like go, okay, yes, I am valuable. I am, you know, I am more than this.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see. Yeah, I guess we won't see because it's a movie. But
Ninth grade.
She also had an honest to God older female friend.
yeah,
By the
that
end
chick
of the
was
film,
so cool.
Yeah, and I
I was so happy
that-
for her. when
I
she
wanted
had
to
that-
see more of her, but she was really...
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that between that and her dad, like
There's that
yeah,
I like it.
I think she'll be okay.
Here's the thing, though. Do you think she's still friends with that girl? Because she's best friends with the guy who tried to assault her.
I think
Oh, sure.
eventually she'll get to the point
Yeah.
where she'll be like, hey, just so you know, your friend's an asshole.
Yeah, your friend's a horrible scumbag.
And that also is a problem. If you hang out with that girl, you're going to be forced to see the dude who makes you uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
then and that's why, like, whenever people are like, you see her in pictures with that man she accused of assaulting her and she's smiling. Yeah, she's smiling because she doesn't want everyone to know what happened and she's pretending everything's okay. It's like, how could she smile if she's around a man who assaulted her? That just pisses me the fuck off.
We were talking about this while we were setting up the room. Like, we all have that friend or that friend of a friend who's like kind of a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, like that's your beef with that person. As much as that's horrible to say in the case of like sexual coercion, I mean, yeah,
It exists.
we all just
Yeah.
kind of like put up with pieces of shit sometimes
Yeah.
because our friends are worth it, I guess. Maybe.
Well, you look
It
at every friend
depends.
group as something that so much of your identity and your life depends on. It's just like there's so many people that if I didn't get to hang out with them, I'd be
If you speak
mortified.
out, if you tell her about what this guy did, will you then be thrown out of the friend group? You know, and then you lose all your existing friends.
And
It's
will
a
she
very
blame
scary-
you?
Yeah,
You
will
don't
she
know.
blame you?
Yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah, there is a ninth grade movie in there somewhere if they wanted to make it.
Why don't
Yeah.
women come forward more? Fuck off with that shit.
Oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move into quotes. Quotes. I'm gonna go first. I have one written down, but since it didn't really come up in the episode, I have to use it. And it's, I thought you didn't like bananas.
That was so good.
The context of that is she told somebody she knows how to give blowjobs, and she clearly doesn't. She's going to test it on a banana, and her dad walks in mid-test, and she's like, "I'm just eating a banana." Thought you didn't like bananas. And it's so good as she tries to eat the banana in front
She gets more and more angry and frustrated, and he's more and more like, what are you upset about?
What are you doing? Like, clearly you hate eating this, and then he gets a banana thrown in his face.
Her reaction to that blowjob YouTube video was
Oh, man.
She went straight for deep throating.
Oh, yeah.
And just like the way she was looking at it, it was like, yeah, no, yes, that's true. Like, stop watching this.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
You're
If
not
you're
wrong.
just learning how to give blowjobs, don't start with deep throat. That same scene where she said she could give a good blowjob was the Code Red drill, which we didn't even talk about.
Oh, yeah.
So good.
It's like
Where
Dr.
he's,
Strangelove
shooting
level
people in the
of
hallway,
satire.
fake-
Bang, you're dead. Bang, you're dead.
It's crazy the kids have to go through that now. I was teaching when we first started doing that, and it was weird. But we didn't go out in the hallway and get shot. You're supposed to
play
like
actors,
lock
yeah.
the door.
Thanks, drama kids.
That's a hard cut to that too. Like
Yeah.
you go from her just lying in bed looking at like YouTube videos to like a hard cut to the next day at school. There's like a dude with a gun going, bang, you're dead. Bang, you're dead.
That's what high school is now.
And yeah,
And they did makeup on the students too. There was one girl at the last shot of that scene with a bullet hole in her head.
Oh,
yeah,
shit.
she's like, "What are you staring at?" And she's having like a conversation, like, "What are you looking at?" But she's just dressed up like a murder victim.
when they're under their desks and she has the courage to go over and talk to the dreamy boy, and then they start talking about like the Code Red drill, and he just goes, this is the moment when you realize what a massive douche he is. And then he goes, I wouldn't be a pussy and sit under my desk. This 8th grade boy.
Yeah, okay, little Mark Wahlberg.
I know. I was just like, oh my god, that's the like. You kind of thought he was a douche, and then he said that, and you're like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And then he asked her for a blowjob.
I actually thought that actor was fantastic. Though. That kid nailed that part. Hopefully, that's not just him. He was acting.
He's an influencer.
He's listening to this like, oh shit.
They had my number.
For me, it's not so much dialogue as the scene where the 8th graders are about to shadow with the 9th graders.
Yeah.
And they're all holding on train style to the lead teacher, and they're walking through that hallway, and that scene plays out really long, and it stands out to me because I'm very familiar with that level of awkwardness and that interfacing with the next gap, like the next generation up, and being such a weird foreign, like you're walking through no man's land.
They walked through the high school the same way that I walked through the prison when I did a tour of prison.
Scared straight. Except you're guaranteed to go to high school.
Yeah.
So sorry, kid.
It was in that moment where I was so worried about her experience there. Because in my mind, like, it only gets worse until you're out of school. And so it was for her to find that friend, it was like, oh, just like a light at the end of that really long, horrible classroom tunnel.
Yeah. It's a moment of grace, like in this movie where so many things are so hard to endure, those little moments of like small kindness. It really does feel like that when you're that age and that lonely. You're just like, oh my God, somebody was just nice to me.
Yeah.
We're going to get married someday. You know what I mean? Like it all becomes blown up in your head.
You know those moments where like you don't want to say it, but you just can't help it. Like you're just so nice. Like I need to tell you that you're just so nice.
And I love that the girl on the other end was totally like, you could tell she was also super awkward. Then this girl thinks she's cool, but she's also such a nerd.
Yeah.
So she's like, no, you're cool. We're both cool.
She's like, oh, I have one that likes me. Come hang out with me and my friends. And then you find out she's not like a freshman. She's a junior or a senior.
Yeah, junior maybe.
But
It's like, whoa.
every aspect of like that whole sequence with the older kids, it's played out in different ways. Mm-hmm. Like I've hung out with people and watched like seasons of Survivor with a senior and his girlfriend, and you know they're doing their own thing, and I'm like, this Survivor's a great show. Not like caring that I'm like a third wheel, or I'm just there to keep things from getting too outrageous, but like. You interface with these older kids in that way.
So you've been thrown. Was this like a brother or sister? You
No,
were
just
thrown into.
just hanging out with older kids.
No, it's just you were like I was thrown in to keep things from getting too outrageous. Were you just
That's
like
my read on
you
it,
were
looking back
you were
on
the
it.
cock block in
Yeah.
this scenario? Okay.
Did you sit in between them?
No, I sat off to the side where I could actually see them if I wanted to look over my periphery. But I'm like, I don't want to see them kissing
There's
face.
so much to talk about in this, and we don't have time. Let's move on to the next quote. That is the most interesting story you've ever told, and I have so many questions, but
You're like the cooler at a casino. I love it.
Weirdly, I feel like I've been there as well in retrospect.
We didn't have an extra episode where we just unpacked this.
Well,
for you.
because like as a church kid, you're often just like, we can't hang out as a boy and a girl. You want to come along? And it's like, sure, okay, I need friends.
They're so much older. They listen to Eminem in their Grand Dam as they drive to.
who hasn't said a quote?
I haven't. My favorite thing about her YouTube videos was the way that she ended them, where she was like, Gucci. Because little kids kids just do stupid shit like that. Like, they have catchphrases that they hear, and it's like, nothing about this is Gucci. Like, what? But it was so great because it was so consistent and, like, dumb, but in a charming way.
I was going to say our sign off today, we should all just say Gucci.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
And there's the kid at the assembly who just shouts Bron James, and everybody laughs, and it's like, God, we were all such little dickheads in 8th grade.
I love those kids who just shout off in the background, and I'm just like, I wish I'd make
I was
Burnham up.
100% one of those kids, and I would just yell the word poop.
Really?
Classic
Jesus.
Brian
Are you
witticism.
surprised?
A classic Brian Dressel
The
witticism.
teacher in me is just like really fucking annoyed right now.
So were the teachers then.
I totally already gave away my favorite quote, but when she's trying to be cool and friendly with the two cool girls, and she's like, "Oh, I really like your shirt. Yeah, I've got shirts too." And I was just like, "Yeah, that's that in a nutshell."
Yeah. Oh.
Can I do an honorable mention quote?
Sure.
No
I have
what?
one as well. So.
Okay, when she's riding to the mall with her dad, which, by the way, the dad, oh my God, at the mall, Jesus, with these shorts.
Yeah.
So they're sitting in the car, and he's just being a dad, and she just goes, "Be quiet and drive, and like, don't look weird and sad, please." So don't look weird and sad.
My honorable mention quote is actually a text message or a direct message that she receives from the popular girl of, "My mom told you I had to invite you to my thing, so this is me doing that."
Oh yeah.
So good.
I also like the DM from the nerdy cousin kid who's like, "Hey, it's," and he misspells his name, and then he like very quickly like sends the right name spelled correctly, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's me too."
Yeah.
Oh, Gab.
That's right. It was Gab.
She's like,
Hey, it's Gab. That's
She's
right.
like, somebody's following me, and then she sees that it's him, and she's like, oh.
I'm gonna get the
has-
quote wrong, but I also love that there's a Gabe quote where he's like, "Also, if there's one of these sauces you like more than the others, you can have mine as an extra." One," or something like that.
I
I'm like,
appreciate all sauces equally.
I also love their Rick and Morty bit. That was
Oh, yeah.
so endearing. I love
Totally.
Rick and Morty.
That led Chewie down a Rick and Morty rant of like, the Szechuan sauce ruined everything.
Oh
We'll move past it.
boy. Sorry.
This movie had different emotional reactions for everyone.
Yeah, totally.
So
Chewie's would be the Szechuan
That was her
sauce.
trigger. Yeah. She was like, "This is the most upsetting movie of the year. That fucking sauce."
all right, so review system, I think if you guys couldn't guess what it's going to be, I'm surprised. It's going to be coming of age movies. So any and all coming of age movies. And I'm going to lead it off with Perks of Being a Wallflower. And I think it's the main reason I'm picking that one is because it's another movie that decided to tell a formative year. This one they went for 9th grade instead of 8th grade, and it's 100% through Charlie's, quote unquote, his name, point of view. Like everything you see throughout that movie is how he sees it. And I think 8th grade kind of does the same thing with Kayla, where almost everything you see in the movie is how she would perceive it. And I think they're both pretty good.
I'm gonna say "Call Me by Your Name" just because that's the only one I can think of right now because I already said it like an hour ago. But you know, I certainly didn't like grow up with like a whirlwind gay romance in the most beautiful Italian villa in the world or anything.
Armie Hammer of
With
all people.
Armie Hammer. But like even as like a straight identifying man who grew up in the opposite of beautiful Italian villa in Southern Illinois. I was still like, this is actually like a really interesting, relatable coming of age story because it's sad without conflict. Like the conflict is that life is moving on and that you're going to go in a different path.
Yeah.
And you're going to be really upset about it. But like, there's at no point is anybody like, "Oh, you're gay, throw rocks at him." Like internally, there's a lot of that for both of these characters. But like, you know, even the dad is just like, "I'm the most supportive man on the face of the earth. So just be yourself." But it's still sad. And it really does also capture what I associate with childhood, which is just like long hours of nothing. Like I just remember looking for shit to do.
See, that's what that movie felt like to me. Long hours of nothing.
Ooh, shots fired. Claws in.
It's weird because I wrote a note in my notes that says this movie reminds me of a lot of other movies that weren't as good, and I cannot remember what any of them were.
Yeah.
I wish I had given myself examples. So I'm gonna go, since I can't get on the internet right now, I'm gonna pick the most obvious example that comes to mind, which is Lady Bird.
Oh, of course.
Because, sorry, I was going to get there before you because I can't remember any other
You should have said it in
coming of age movies I know.
unison.
But yeah, for obvious reasons. I mean, there was a lot of similarities, like Sam brought up, and the relationship with parents was an issue, although her mom was way bitchier in Lady Bird. But there was a dumb boy. It's just very, very similar time period and a lot of similar issues.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do the myth of the American Sleepover, which was the director who did It Follows. He did kind of a coming of age, like last day of summer kind of thing with a bunch of kids, and this is kind of a weird connection, but it also used music that wasn't fit for the kids in there, and I thought it was like that was always a distracting thing for me. But then like I could get by it and like, oh, I can see what this is all about. It kind of had similar vibes in terms of like coming of age and growing up in that awkwardness, but just taking a slice of each of these kids' lives as they do this like wacky sleep, not wacky, but like just this random sleepover. And yeah, that's my review of it.
Nice.
I'm gonna go with Say Anything because it's got a female character that I want to like who's overshadowed by douchey dude things.
By Peter Gabriel in a boombox.
It's like
You're
such
like,
a
turn
good
off the
moment, but I
music.
hate it so much.
It's not
like-
okay, that
it's-
scene.
Because she's like so cool, and I get why he'd be enamored with her, but
She told
it's
him to
just-
go away.
Yeah, and it's just like Jesus Christ.
And then he ends up on the plane with her. It's like, this is not romantic.
Creepy Lloyd,
Yeah.
Lloyd in his creepy Lloyd coat.
Just because he's cute John Cusack does not mean it's okay.
Yeah.
And he's like, I gave her my heart and she gave me a pen. And it's like, she didn't have to give you shit, man. You're lucky you got a pen. She doesn't owe you a fucking thing.
Yeah, you were
Yeah.
batting
Take
out
your
your
blue
league.
balls.
You're lucky you
and
got
your
to
fucking
play.
pen and go masturbate.
Take your blue balls and your pen and get out of here.
Yeah.
Masturbate with your pen.
No, don't.
I mean,
unless
different
that's
strokes
your
for
end,
different
yeah.
folks.
There's
People are into
safer ways
tuning.
of doing
They
that.
enjoy it.
Sounding, not
Sounding.
tuning.
Maybe
Sorry.
it's for sticking up your butt. That
But
could
there's
be.
safer ways of doing both
You
of those
also
things.
should not, yeah, you also should not stick a pen up your butt.
Get
Yeah.
a butt plug.
Hi, I'm
Don't
Derek.
tell people what they can't do.
Kink shaming. Kink shaming.
No, we just want people to be safe with their kinks.
Put the pen in a condom and shove it up your butt. You're good to go.
You probably, no, you should use a butt plug.
That's a lot
that's-
bigger than a pen.
Well,
Where's
it's,
this
it's meant to
coming of
come
age
out.
story?
I mean, a
That's what I
pen's
want.
going to get lost up there and you're going to have to go to the emergency room. We should put that on the Samwise. We should ask questions about butt stuff.
I mean, those movies are pretty gay. So
Also true.
Let's do a round of plugs, if you will.
Hey, perfect
Samwise is
segue.
going to have a whole thing about butt stuff this week.
It's butt month on Samwise.
Oh boy.
Oh my God, can you do butt month? That'd be amazing. Just to have
Okay,
butt month.
I'm definitely asking you
So
a question.
for those of you who are a little confused, Samwise is a podcast in which I answer any question in life using the Lord of the Rings extended editions and their special features. You can message me
About
at
butt stuff.
about butt stuff if you so choose.
I'm going to.
At sam.wise.ath@gmail.com or 608-561-2755.
Number one more time.
608-561-2755.
Do you answer?
No.
Okay.
It goes straight
That
to
would be
voicemail.
awkward. If you're like, okay, well, can you answer my question right now?
if we get the budget for it, there will be a Lord of the Rings helpline. Or it'll be a media device.
That'd be
No, it
amazing.
takes a lot of research to
does.
answer those questions. Those movies are long. Please leave a voicemail.
For me, as always, listen to Venture Brothers podcast. We are just about done with season 2. By the time this one comes out, I think we'll have just the 2-part finale to go through. That's it for me.
I'm gonna make some new stuff to put in my Etsy shop, but it's probably not gonna be up by the time this podcast goes out. So if you want to commission me to make you a costume, even though Halloween has passed, there's cons coming up. Emily Blake Sews at gmail.com, or you can check out my Etsy shop, Emily Blake Sews, and I also have a website. I've got to redesign it, but emilyblakesewz.com.
Cool. Anything to play, John?
Not yet, nope.
Eric, you have a movie rattling around in the internet?
I do. Rattling around on Shudder. If you go to Shudder and look up Late Phases, I wrote a werewolf movie a few years ago. It has, among other things, an iron lung with a severed head and blood and all sorts of gruesome stuff. If you like Sabrina, then you'll love this gory werewolf movie.
I've actually seen it. I didn't know you wrote it.
Oh, you've
That's
seen Late
fucking
Phases?
dope, dude.
Oh, great.
It's called Late Phases.
Thanks.
Yeah, you should check it out. It's good.
Oh, thanks. Oh. If only 8th grade Eric could see me now. And then I also volunteer with, if you're in Los Angeles or around there, look up 826LA. They're a nonprofit writing center and tutoring center, and they do great things with great kids. And there's also 826 locations around the country. So see if there's one near you and go teach a kid how to be a writer and make their life a little better.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I will bring today's episode.
Oh, wait.
Oh.
We should also plug the website, athpod.com.
Good point.
There's articles every Wednesday and Friday by some of the fine folk around this table, and most recently from some really great special guests, including John's wife, Jandy.
Oh, yeah, I really liked her. She was good.
Yeah.
That's fun stuff. All right, so with that, we'll say goodbye. Or Gucci.
Gucci. But poop.
Oh, dear.
Roger.